The Empirical Energy Podcast blows open the silent revolution, rewriting the rules of global energy markets. Measured, verified energy is no longer an alternative. It's becoming the gold standard. We dive deep with the producers, traders, consultants, and renegades driving this seismic shift. Step inside the raw mechanics of how verification and blockchain-fueled trading are dismantling the old systems and creating a future where alternative energy doesn't just compete, it takes over. This is the movement of reshaping energy as we know it, bold, unstoppable, and just getting started. Here is your host, Mark Smith.
Hey everybody, it's Mark Smith, the host of Empirical Energy Podcast. I'm here with Ehsan Daneshvar. Did I get your name right or?
Absolutely right, Mark.
Great. Well, so tell me about your background because you have an interesting background. We were talking about your oil and gas background and kind of how you got into the energy transition business in Europe. And we'll be talking a little bit about where things have started, where they are today with, as of today, there's a war going on. And when you're watching this later, it may not be happening. But, when we're talking about different situations going on in Iran and things like that, and what that does for global oil and gas and energy transition. So anyway, Ehsan, take it from there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark, for this opportunity. I'm really honored here with you. Yeah, as a background, graduated in the university with a petroleum geology degree. However, I have 2 masters in the water systems, water resource management, let's say. And my PhD was specialized on a bridge between the oil and gas and the marine environment. That was the start point for me to look into the environment. But I joined oil and gas because the time I graduated, oil and gas was a big hit in the world. Right. And, in 2021 November, I joined COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. And I found out, the world is trying to do something important. That time, the Paris Agreement went on and they wanted to review what's going on after that. And it was a very, very good gathering. And I had a couple of the interview with some people there to tell me about their view and what was their vision about that. I talked to the environmental ministry in Denmark. I talked to John Kerry in US as the president, US president aid on environment. I talked to Nigerian Ministry of Environment as well from the different countries and different regions, and found out this energy transition is absolutely important for them. However, the lobbyists from the oil and gas companies are against of that. That time, I remember it was a 5 hours discussion about one word, phasing out or removing coal. That was a very big discussion between the leaders to put it in that final, the outcome of the conference. This is how it started. And from that time, I went through the energy transition subject and learned and tried to educate myself. But the things happened. It was February 2022. Russia invaded Ukraine and started that conflict. And European just woke up what happened around us. For years, for ages, they're using cheap oil and gas to build the industry and for to be in a market as a very high industrial countries. But now they have to say goodbye to that because of lots of the conflict in the region. Germany and France and UK decided to move as much as they can. This is about the start for me, how I become very interested in this subject. And then I tried to go and learn more about the relationship between the global change, the climate change, energy security in Europe and Asia.
So what's the current state, right? So people are thinking, we're going to do this, and the European markets come together and they subsidize some changes, like maybe for wind and solar and carbon capture and things like that. And then, people start to decommission coal plants and things like that. Then boom, the Russia war breaks out. what impacted? Because at the end of the day, they got to have energy. So did they shift? Did they change? Did they go back to oil and gas? Did they refire up coal fire plants? What happened because of that?
Right. No, very good question. After that happens, all the decision and agreement from the Paris Agreement toward the Glasgow Agreement, they wanted to escape of that because they couldn't meet the deadlines. For example, Germany had to close out all the coal sourced power plants, for example, and they were seeing, they are actually witnessing lots of the shutdown factories because there's no enough gas for them in that year 2023. That was a very horrible year for the industry in Germany. They decided to do one thing, remove gas to the better category. They call it clean energy. Then clean energy was renewable energies like the wind, like sun, right? And then they put gas and nuclear on that as well. Then gas and nuclear become the clean energy. Then that was one thing. And the second things they wanted to make sure they could extend the net zero target toward the 2050. And then they said, okay, we cannot reach to the zero carbon footprint on that time. Let's amend it to 10%. Then they went to go, all right, we want to achieve at least 10% in 30 years of that case. That's happened. In the other hand, UK did a big change in the policies. You know that we have a Brent, right? Have you heard about the Brent oil? And very famous in the North Sea, north of the UK, and it's between the UK and Norway mainly, and some part for Denmark as well. But what happened? They tried to close down most of the oil and gas activity, and they said because of that we want to bring CCUS as a main target for the business. And they try to subsidize a lot on that, giving a lot of budget. And at the same time, they built lots of the wind farm and solar panel farms to create more energy from the renewables. And it was about a couple of months ago, UK achieved a record to have 76% of the energy consumption coming from the renewables, while 5 years ago it was only 20%. That was the achievement, but it's not enough. When there's no wind, that means no energy. When there's no sun, that means no energy. Again, vulnerable situation. This is why they found out about this reality. They faced this reality. We cannot get rid of the oil and gas completely. And then they went for the new policies to bring some activities, but they were very careful to do these activities in other countries, not to do it in the UK region or at the same time, but Norway increased the activity over there. And they try to increase their storage capacity, like the Netherlands, Germany, France, and UK, and at the same time try to bring more nuclear plant and innovation in the nuclear plant, but it takes 10 years to build up, right? All of these come together, and the one main issues, what happened about the security of energy in this green continent? For that case, again, they were thinking how we can get Russia to play with us. This is why that was a big conflict with them. Then they decided to find another hubs for those. Then Qatar came to the picture. We have LNG. Spain and Portugal has got the LNG terminals already because they are independent from the Russian oil and gas, because they are the end of the Europe, that part. Then lots of the new terminals for the LNG start building up around the south part of the Europe. Then Qatar become a main LNG exporter to them. They import from them, but at the same time, they had a big deal with the US LNG as well. Then US LNG become the number one in the world, and then Qatar become number two. I mean, this war, this situation helped to switch between the providers. Then providers switch between Russia to US, and then also Qatar coming as a main player. These are the to have a one basket of the variety of sources for energy, renewables, nuclear, gas, mainly as a LNG, and also less dependent on the oil, and at the same time try to reduce CO2 by capturing of that and then inject it on sort of subsurface depleted gas storage.
Now I got this little chart. Actually, I'll share this here. So this morning I was on a webinar, and it was the UN has this program called the OGMP, Oil and Gas Methane Partnership, and they were talking about the oil and gas production that is being essentially verified under these OGMP rules. So you can see here on the importer side, LNG is a big thing, with EU and then China, Japan, and probably Korea. And then there's the production, the suppliers of that. Yeah, United States is on track to be quite a bit. And then Qatar and, Australia and Norway, and they probably ship a lot to Asia there. But at any rate, it was pretty interesting. So sounds to me like what EU has actually done is, yeah, build a lot of regasification plants, either floating or onshore, and then get that in there. So the thing with GMP is interesting because to be a member, you have to hit target goals of 0.2% methane intensity. So, there's a bunch of rules and stuff like that. So interesting that the EU at some point made, LNG, natural gas be, one of the part of the energy transition, because you could fire up a regasification plant way faster than you can get a nuclear plant going, right? So LNG has become a key thing. It's a key export for the US, but it's a key import for the EU, I guess. So now we mentioned before we hit record that the recent news with you mentioned IEA, I think, made an announcement in regards to the whole war in Iran and what the energy security implications. Tell me about that.
Okay, right. I mean, the situation is being escalating hour by hour. And I had an interview with BBC a couple of hours ago, and I talk about the situation and how this oil price and this fever of the escalation can be, let's say, defined. The oil market and the oil price, it's not entirely about what's happening. It's about how long this disaster, this chaos would stay.
Right.
Would stand. For example, when Iran this morning said, "Okay, we're gonna mines in the Strait of Hormuz," it didn't change the oil price hugely because soon after, U.S. bombardment and then hit those vessels. But it was a threat because we heard from the news and it was leaked. The first one was leaked from the media. Oh, they are going to do that. And at the same time, leaked from the other side, you guys had exported more oil than compared to before war back in 24th of February time. Then that means your vessel also needed to pass. If that means if you put mines, that means no one's going. But it as a threat, the market didn't react to that. But when the two tankers wanted to go and it was hit by RGC in that time, then the price spiked up. So we had a $5 per barrel in 1 hour in gone up because that's the situation. But one talk or one interview from President Trump that's coming to ease the situation, again, that price coming down, it's about that. Right. Normally, for that situation and the scenarios, there are 3 options or 3 solutions. First of all, and the most important part is to go to the countries they have a reserve or a strategic reserves, and they decide to release some of those. That's one. The second one is find alternative producers or ask them if they have any capacity of the more production, push them for production. And the third one is find a different route for that, right? For the third one, different route. Saudi Arabia has got a pipeline. They can export around 2 million barrels per day to the Red Sea zones. Then that's the rerouting that, right? That's the detour. For the second one, which Brazil and in Nigeria or Venezuela and Guyana, those countries they have some capacity about up to 2-3 millions to add to that, right? Right. We are talking about the 20 barrel per day. Then the first option was to releasing reserve. This is why those one is going to be 5 millions barrel per day. Then still market is nervous about another 15 million barrels per day. Then this is why EIA suggested and requested about that release. It went about 400 million barrels. 400 billion barrels, that means about 20 days to 25 days. Then the market can be saved for 20 days if things happening today not take more than 10 to 12 days conflict as a forecast. This is going to change the situation. The price now, now we are talking for the Brent is 92 and for the WTI is about $87, something like that, right? This is why IEA ask countries to do it. Who is going to do that? Britain, Great Britain, UK, European Union countries, and Japan. They decided to do this, but at the same time, Japan and United European Union are the importing countries rather than the exporting, right?
Yeah.
That's the things. Then again, when they're releasing that 400 million, it's not, you cannot divide it to 15 million barrels. Say, oh, okay, it can take about 25, 26 days because they need more oil compared to those countries releasing. I mean, compared to that much they are producing and consumption, you check that, then there is some numbers needs to be corrected. This is why I'm saying it's gonna stay for 20 days. The psychology of the market gets calmer, the nerve get calmer. At the same time, Norway also has asked Algeria, Nigeria, those African countries as well. They decided, Brazil, as I said, they decided to increase their oil. But one thing's here missing, LNG from Qatar, because Qatar shut down the LNG exporting facilities because of the fear of being targeted more and hugely or severely. 20% of the whole LNG in the world coming from that area, from Qatar only. And the main destination for that is European Union, China, and India. Then that's another sort of a price for the gas, and there's no big reservoirs for the gas to say, okay, I'm going to release gas. It's not like that. For example, UK has only reserve for 12 days, the maximum as a strategic reserves. That's another problem happening there. And the third things, it's about the fertilizers. 30 to 35 fertilizers and petrochemical products coming from that area as well. That's not happening, they're not affecting the situation or the world situation at the moment, but if you look at the long term, fertilizers can affect the agriculture. And agriculture is about the food security chain. Things happen after 2022 again in Russia-Ukraine conflict. If you remember that time, the oil and pasta or white flour, all those been disappearing from the shelf, the supermarket shelf. But I'm not saying it's going to be like that, but it's going to affect slightly, but in 6 to 8 months.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, yeah, the importance of fertilizer and where that actually, comes from, because they don't realize that it's, natural gas. That's
Absolutely.
that's one of the biggest areas is just, natural gas. So yeah, the energy side is huge from that perspective. I think in fact, I have a little slide here that's pretty interesting when you look at the base level of, energy, fossil fuels and electricity, and up from there is food, right? So the growth of the world's population grow in exact correlation with fertilizer. 60% is synthetic fertilizer from natural gas. And then, of course, you got materials, cement, steel, plastics, ammonia, and then engine and ships. So these, obviously the direct users of energy, they're affected first, then food, then materials, then ships. But yeah, it all runs on energy. So interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah. So the question is, will the world ever get calm enough to actually get to an energy transition? Because, as you said, like as soon as this happens, people start going, oh, crud, I just need to get back to oil and gas. And they kind of push away all the other renewable projects or, carbon capture projects for at least new ones. And then maybe it gets back to some level of normal, whatever the new normal. And then they say, okay, now we can go back to focusing on, will we ever get to an energy transition is the question, or how long before that happens?
Right, very good question. If we go back to 2024 and early 2025, and if you're attending conferences or talk or everywhere in the world, people coming with the graph to show, oh guys, we are end of the era of the oil and gas or fossil fuels. This 102 or 104 million per barrels is going to be down to 60 millions in a 5 6 years. And they were targeting 2030 to 2035 is going to be 50% of that. But a revolution happened in 2025, which it was AI. And for the AI, the graph that you showed me now on the top of that is the chips, right?
Right.
And
And the
for
power
that,
of those chips.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
like I
for,
look at Elon Musk's Colossus 2 data center in Memphis, 1 giga, like this is a gigawatt type plant. He had to buy a natural gas processing plant, and then he had to buy a bunch like 7 turbines from Europe that he grabbed, put them on mobile units so he could fire them all up to power 300,000 NVIDIA chips. That's a lot of that's the equivalent of, I think, powering like 100,000 homes or something.
absolutely, absolutely. And that revolution made everyone to review what they were thinking. We need more energy for our data centers and for the servers. This is why, for example, UAE become one of the hub for the AI in Asia after, of course, after China and or US, of course. But they need energy for that. They need oil and gas again. This is why oil and gas come back to the picture and push energy transition for the European countries mostly because if you go to Southeast Asia, the new you know the no the new economy leaders over there, like Indonesia, like India, like Malaysia, South Korea, those countries still need cheap energy to grow, right? For their industry, for their economy. And this is why they are dependent on that. At the same time, they are looking for this, solutions to battle their climate change impacts, negative impact on their lands, right? And then deforestation, also lots of the up raising the sea levels, blah blah. Then some countries they needed to bring that money and technology to them to help them, but at the same time they're producing lots of the CO2, lots of the methane, right? If you're coming to Middle East, that's the main source of the methane in the world because all of those producing gas here then they produce loads of the methane and then make the atmosphere and our earth warmer and warmer. And when we get warmer, that things happening all around the world. And what is climate change? What's happening? This is not new things. Just intensify what's been doing. For example, if you had a rain in one year in one area, let's say, I don't know, let's say in London for 200 millimeters, just as example, per year. Now you have that 200 millimeters maybe in one week. things happen in Dubai, if you remember. That's the big flood because the rain they had it for 5, 6 years happen in 1 hour. This is climate change. I mean, intensify things, getting more severe. If we have lots of the wind, those wind going to be storm, or this is like that, right? Okay, energy transition depends of the countries that you were to be talking about. Depends of the attitude of the leaderships. I think I was talking to you in February. I would say to you in 5 years to 10 years, Europe going to be the main land to use about more than 85% of their energy from the renewables, including the clean energy, right? But now something's gonna change because still they need coal to burn. They need more oil to burn. They need more gasoline in the market because there was a plan to get rid of all the diesel engine car on the road by 2030. Now it's moved to 2040, for example. They're pushing. The plan is they're going to push it. I think no one wants to move out completely from the fossil fuels until they can. They have to. I don't think in a very near future we're gonna see completely move to a renewable energy, which we should. But again, it's not a main, and they are sustainable for the environment, but not sustainable for the supply.
Yeah. So in the meantime, we do what we can. And, I'm super involved in, monitoring, measuring the MMRVT stuff, the certifications and stuff. So at least those that want to comply can empirically measure, their emissions, their throughput, everything else. So we're all about empirical measurement. That's the name, Empirical Energy Podcast. So anyway, hey, thank you, Ehsan. I super appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you? And, what should they reach out to you for? Like, I know we mentioned that you do in CCUS type projects, but what kind of projects and consulting do you do these days, and how can people find you?
Okay, at the moment, we operate globally from Gulf of America, bracket Mexico, come to the Indonesia, Jakarta, all the way. From that, I'm involved on a field development and working with the depletion gas reservoirs. My main background is the reservoir quality. It doesn't matter, it's for water, for gas, for the oil, for the CO2, or for a hydrogen or something. That was my background. At the moment, I'm mostly managing a couple of the teams in Middle East, North Europe, in US, and also the Southeast Asia and North Africa. As I said, main project specialized on to help big operator companies to find out why their field, their wells, their production is depleted, and what they can do, and how we can find the best reservoir to inject our CO2 into that, the best reservoirs that has a good capacity for storage hydrogen, or even for the nuclear waste that we're going to be safe for that, and how we can make the efficient world. As I said, maybe during our talk, Mark, I believe we have 3 pillars for this security and climate change. We need to increase the efficiency. I help those companies to increase their efficiency, which that make them to reduce their carbon footprint, and that way. And we have to emphasize on a gas reservoir and make it as LNG rather than to have it in a different way, because more methane on that case. And the third one is we have to absorb, collect, and remove as much as CO2 from the world, and use the renewable energies as much as we can from our life to the biggest scales.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Son. Appreciate it. This has been really enlightening. Appreciate it. All right.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark. I'm really honored and really appreciate that opportunity to talk to you and with Empirical Energy Podcast.
All right.
The Empirical Energy Podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.